I haven't run into a drug that is as guiding as Ambien is. It's persuasive. It's like someone on your shoulder.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Turley, and welcome back to Pharmatopia. In this podcast, we explore the history and laws that make up modern drug culture and give in-depth analysis into the amazing and occasionally odd stories from the world's black and not-so-black market. On today's show, we'll be discussing Zolpidem, or Ambien, the sleeping medication notorious for its paradoxical side effects, and dip into what it reveals about the science of consciousness. We'll talk about its use recreationally with Reddit moderator Tyler, who you may know better as TyZen5, and medically with Dr. John White, who is studying whether this class of sleeping medication can help people, of all things, out of comatose states. So sit down, relax, and let's find out if that bump in the night was you all along. One of the beauties of the social media site Reddit is its niche communities or subreddits. The drug presence is especially fascinating to me, and I've spent a good amount of time browsing those small populations dedicated to their mind-altering substance of choice. However, there is one subreddit in particular which caught my eye that resides a little outside the rest of the pharmaceutical sphere. It's a community dedicated to the drug Zolpidem, or Ambien as you probably know it, which is the most popular prescription sleeping medication in the world. Right off the bat, you might think this is a little odd. How could a drug which puts people to sleep amass 23,000 subscribers in its dedicated community? Well, the answer lies on the front page of the subreddit. Unlike other drug communities which post dosage information and articles relating to the substance, r/Ambien is dedicated to experience. You see, Ambien is unique in that it can possess paradoxical properties. That means instead of its normal effect of sedating you, in some cases, it'll do exactly the opposite and make you more active, even when asleep. If you take the drug as recommended and experience this effect, it could mean getting up in the middle of the night and making yourself a sandwich. However, for those psychonauts in the Ambien subreddit, this means resisting the urge to sleep altogether. On today is a fellow Reddit user who is pretty familiar with the goings-on of the Ambien community.
My name is Tyler. I go by TyZen5 on Reddit. I moderate a couple of subreddits over there, including r/Ambien.
So how'd you get into this drug scene?
It's just something I kind of gravitated towards when I started using Reddit. I guess the timing was just right. I'd say I'm pretty familiar with it. I'm not prescribed it anymore, but for about 6 months there, I was taking the drug fairly regularly as a sleep aid. Most of the posts you'll see on the front page are people on Ambien either writing or sharing things that happen to them on Ambien. I think a lot of it's exaggerated. I hate to say it, but a lot of it, I think, is just people looking for upvotes. We get everything you can think of almost, from just complete gibberish to screenshots of people, like I said, texting or communicating with other people on Ambien. We'll get people that come in and just tell disaster stories. We'll get people that come in and tell just stories where they had a great time. It's a real mixed bag. There's a theme that I think is kind of common, and it's people, or this has actually happened to me as well, but people ordering things while under the influence, like on Amazon or that kind of thing. My favorite that I've seen on this subreddit is someone bought a live golden Tibetan yak, but he posted a credit card receipt from 2 a.m. for about $3,000. Yeah, yak that's a whole nother level. You're ordering livestock.
If you look at the small print on an Ambien bottle, you'll find a couple of warnings for side effects. These include sleepwalking, abnormal thinking, and strange behavior. Turns out, when you mix a hypnotic sleep drug and the desire for a crazy night, you still get a crazy night. Funny how that works.
Though I think the one that people know us for the best is it was about a year ago, I think. Someone took a couple of Ambien. Well, he shaved his balls I don't know how else to say that. But and ended up Snapchatting it to half of his contact list. So coworkers, family, friends, everybody ended up getting that snap, and that one got fairly big. I loved that one.
But the best part is when he captioned the picture that he sent to all of his loved ones.
Oh gosh, smoothest balls in America, the U.S.
Yeah. To explain why this happens, today we have on Dr. John White, who researches the science of consciousness and how we can use the interesting side effects of drugs like Ambien for medical purposes. He also directs the Moss Rehabilitation Research Institute in Philadelphia, which is part of the Einstein Healthcare Network.
Zolpidem is a pretty safe drug. It has relatively few side effects. In the general population who take it for sleeping, probably the best known side effect is people getting up in the middle of the night and engaging in bizarre behaviors like making sandwiches and eating them, or getting in their car and driving around and then not remembering it. So that's obviously a very negative thing in a healthy person, but frankly, if an unconscious patient were to get up and start making a sandwich or wanting to go for a drive, that would be quite a bit of progress.
But this is a sleeping medication, right? How come a drug that's meant to sedate you has such counterintuitive side effects?
Well, I don't think I fully know the answer to that, or maybe anyone does, but Ambien or Zolpidem is related to the class of drugs called benzodiazepines, which includes diazepam or Valium, Ativan, and lots of other drugs in that class. They're all sedatives that affect a particular class of neurotransmitter receptors and GABA receptors. Ambien affects those same receptors, but is a little different chemically. All of the benzodiazepine drugs and related drugs can have paradoxical effects. So, for example, if you take them to calm down as an anxiety treatment rather than at bedtime for sleep, there's a certain number of people who, instead of calming down, get kind of agitated and wound up. I think that the most, again, this is not well proven, but I think that the brain's normal function includes inhibitory forces that are important. So, we have all kinds of drives and desires and thoughts that we don't act on. And there are drugs, stimulant-type drugs, that might cause you to have more goals, more energy, more things you want to do, and you might see an increase in certain behaviors. But you could also see an increase in behaviors because you take away the inhibition, and now people do things that they might otherwise only have thought about. So, that's a kind of crude explanation, but these drugs all inhibit certain structures, but inhibiting those structures may disinhibit other structures. I've done a number of studies focused on the population of patients who are unconscious for long periods of time, patients we refer to as having disorders of consciousness. And in particular, I've, with some colleagues, done research showing that even patients with that very severe form of brain injury can have a surprisingly positive outcome over many years of recovery. We've helped develop more sensitive measures of consciousness that can help us identify who's beginning to regain consciousness early on. And importantly, with a network of colleagues in the United States and in Europe, we published the first study to demonstrate that a medication could accelerate the recovery of consciousness after brain injury.
So how were you able to create a scale for consciousness?
In order to measure consciousness, first of all, we need to understand that we can never measure it directly. It's always an inference because consciousness itself is invisible. So the method that we've developed here involves looking at the statistical relationship between things that the environment provides, like commands that I might ask a patient to perform or images that I might try to have the patient look at, and the behaviors that they might do, such as moving a body part or orienting their eyes. Early, as people are beginning to regain consciousness, their behavior is very inconsistent. So they're unlikely to follow a command every time or look at an image every time. And so it requires some statistical analysis to make sure that their behavior is really related to what's going on in the environment and not just random behavior. We know the success rate. We don't know how to identify who will be successful and who won't. The success rate is about 5%. So it's uncommon, but it's not rare. And as I say, that involves, within an hour or so, a pretty dramatic increase in the level of conscious behavior. It could be a patient who's completely unconscious and then begins to interact with their environment and with other people, or it could be a patient who can interact to some degree but very inconsistently, who becomes more consistent and develops more complex behavior. But one way or another, it's an abrupt improvement in conscious behavior that occurs within about an hour of when the drug is given.
So you give them the drug and then it just wears off and they become unconscious again?
Yes, indeed. As far as we know, once the drug wears off, patients are likely to return to the state that they were in before the drug was given. Our initial hope was that once we identified a patient who had the ability to respond to the drug like that, we could then give the drug more frequently and basically maintain consciousness throughout the day. We haven't, in our own research, we've only studied the question of who responds and what proportion of people respond. We haven't done ongoing treatment studies. But in my conversations with family members of responders who have tried to use the drug in an ongoing way, some are able to do that. Some are able to take the drug once or twice or even 3 times a day and benefit from it. But other people report that if they give it every day to their family member, the effects get less and less each day, and eventually the drug stops working, and they have to take a vacation from the drug, and then if they try it again after a few weeks, it will again have the positive effect. So again, this is another thing we don't understand, why some people who benefit seem to have a reliable and stable benefit. Other people who benefit seem to develop tolerance to the drug. And of course, that's very emotionally challenging for family members to discover that your family member has the potential to be conscious and to become very hopeful that you can now have an ongoing conscious interaction with them, only to find out that you can have an hour of conscious interaction with them every couple of weeks. That's obviously a big disappointment. We don't fully know who can benefit from this treatment. In our research, we've given the drug to people with a wide range of kinds of brain damage. Most of the people we've studied have had traumatic injuries through motor vehicle accidents, falls, and the like, but we have also had patients who had severe strokes that led them to be unconscious, or infections of the brain, or other kinds of, or loss of oxygen due to a cardiac arrest. And we have had small numbers of patients regain consciousness in these different groups. So it doesn't seem to be specific to a particular kind of brain injury. We don't yet know what distinguishes the 5% of people who do respond to the drug from the 95% of people who don't. Although, as I mentioned, one theory is that some patients' unconsciousness is caused by them being locked in this particular circuit, whereas other patients may be unconscious because they just have widespread destruction of the brain that's not amenable to a treatment like this. When I first began this research, I already expected that the number of patients who would respond to the drug would be small, but I was hopeful that for those who did respond to the drug, the benefits would be great. I've become less optimistic about that because of the reason I gave, that the number of people who can use the drug frequently enough to kind of live a conscious life seems to be pretty small. So now my hope is more that the drug can be a probe to help us understand the difference between reversible unconsciousness and irreversible unconsciousness.
But you still feel like it's worth continuing to pursue drug-based solutions.
I'm feeling optimistic about the science of consciousness and our ability to make progress. I'm less optimistic about this particular drug being, a big step forward clinically. One of the real challenges, though, in research in this area, and this is a change that's happened in the course of my career, is that this patient population is defined by what they can't do. They're defined by being unconscious. But the more we study, the more we understand that the absence of consciousness doesn't tell you anything specific about the brain. You could be unconscious because practically your entire brain is destroyed, or you could be unconscious because certain key structures aren't working very well. And so there's really no reason to imagine that any treatment can help every single person who's unconscious. And especially treatments that that affect the biology of the brain, presumably they have to be matched to the particular biological problem in an individual's brain if they're going to work. And so we run the risk, if we do clinical trials on the general population of unconscious people, that some really valuable treatment will be tossed out because the people that it helps are mixed in with a whole bunch of people who can't be helped by any treatment. And so I think the future of research in this area is to make progress in identifying the different biological subtypes of patients who are unconscious, and then beginning to do research on some more pure subtypes that seem to have preservation of important brain structures.
Now, I know this isn't exactly your field, but I'd still like to hear your opinion on it, at least so we can get a different perspective. There's a big community that's developed in the last couple of years that has started taking Ambien recreationally for the excitatory side effects. What do you think about this really very odd drug is so appealing to people?
Well, I don't really feel that I have any substantial expertise. The human species seeks ways of altering its consciousness. That's been true from the beginning of time, through alcohol and cannabis and, a million other substances, and even young children like spinning around in circles and making themselves dizzy. So it's a natural human tendency to seek ways of experiencing consciousness differently. And as soon as people discover that a drug can do that, there's a certain group of people who will want to experience that experience.
I think people like the goofiness of it. That was the appeal for me. personally was just how goofy it makes you feel when you're under it. It's not quite like any other drug I can say that I've taken. It's very hazy, very dreamlike, and it's a lot like being very, very sleep deprived or almost sleepwalking.
Apparently, the effect is so unique that the drug has adopted a mascot, the Ambien Walrus.
Right, so that got started, I think it was about 10 years ago. There's a comic, a web comic called Toothpaste for Dinner. It was created by a guy named Drew Fairweather, and one of his characters was this walrus that he used to personify Ambien, and it took off on the internet. I know Reddit and 4chan in particular shared this comic quite a bit, and so it kind of took off. But the idea is that this character would just suggest the most outlandish stuff for the other characters in the comic to do. It was trying to capture that feeling you get on the drug where it feels as though something is compelling you to do stuff you normally wouldn't, just goofy, outlandish stuff. Oh gosh, it's unlike anything else I'm having issues drawing comparisons to it. Oh gosh, I don't want to call it disassociative. I keep coming back to that word, but I don't think it's really accurate. I haven't run into a drug that is as guiding as Ambien is. It's persuasive. It's like someone on your shoulder. And I think that's why that cartoon has gotten so big. It's very much like having someone else in the room with you, another voice.
To clarify, less than 1% of Ambien users experience hallucinations and depersonalization when using the drug as recommended, so chances are you won't experience the effects desired by the recreational community if you take it normally. That said, never operate vehicles or any kind of machinery while on Ambien. That's just a recipe for a bad time. I'd like to thank Tyler and Dr. White for taking time out of their busy schedules and appearing on the podcast today. I'd also like to give my congratulations to Dr. White and the staff of Moss Rehab for once again being named a national top 10 rehabilitation facility by U.S. News & World Report. Thank you for tuning into Pharmatopia. I hope you enjoyed and will continue to enjoy this series. This podcast is self-funded, so if you'd like to support the show and get updates on future episodes, you can become a patron by heading on over to pharmatopia.org. Anybody who becomes a patron by pledging $1 or more per episode gets to vote on episodes for next season. On our website, you can also find additional information about the episode, including music and guest speakers. Thanks for listening. Take care.